Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan, February 15th, 1988. Soviet medical records from Hill 3234 show battlefield survivors reporting inconsistencies in their own memories, and Afghan tribal elders refusing to speak about what they witnessed on that frozen peak. Welcome to the War Maestro's Archive, where tonight we examine the classified files of Hill 3234, where military medicine encountered phenomena that challenged everything doctors thought they knew about life and death. In war, we prepare for physical wounds, but what happens when the battlefield damages something deeper than flesh and bone? On January 7th through 8th, 1988, 39 Soviet paratroopers held Hill 3234 against overwhelming Mujahideen forces. 6 died, 28 were wounded. After 18 hours of desperate fighting, they achieved victory. 3 days later, command inexplicably abandoned the position. Afghan tribal elders had warned both sides that Hill 3234 was cursed ground where warriors' spirits could not rest. The Soviets dismissed such warnings as primitive superstition. What follows is based on classified medical records that suggest the elders were right. Captain Dmitry Kozlov had seen impossible things during his 2 years as a medical officer with the 40th Army, but nothing prepared him for what walked into his field hospital that morning. Senior Lieutenant Alexei Volkov stood in the doorway, uniform pressed, posture perfect, requesting permission to return to active duty. 3 weeks earlier, Kozlov had pronounced this same man dead. "You were clinically deceased for 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Kozlov said, flipping through medical charts that should have been filed with the morgue paperwork. "Your heart stopped. No pulse, no brain activity. I signed your death certificate myself." Volkov's pale blue eyes never wavered. "Sir, I feel fine, ready for deployment." The medical tent fell silent except for the generator's steady hum. Kozlov studied the young officer who had supposedly died from massive blood loss after taking shrapnel to his femoral artery during the Hill 3234 assault. The wound had been catastrophic, a textbook case of exsanguination. Yet here stood Volkov, no visible scarring, blood pressure normal, reflexes sharp. "Lieutenant, you were dead. Not unconscious, not in shock. Dead. We prepared your body for transport to Moscow." Kozlov's voice carried the weight of a man questioning his own sanity. "Your skin was gray. Your body temperature dropped to 18 degrees Celsius. I personally closed your eyes." Something flickered across Volkov's face, a micro-expression that lasted less than a second. For just that moment, Kozlov could have sworn the lieutenant's eyes held the glassy stare of a corpse. "Captain, I remember the hill. I remember the fighting, but I also remember watching myself die." Volkov's words came slowly, as if he was translating them from another language. "I stood over my own body and watched you work on me. You said something to Sergeant Petrov about writing to my mother." Kozlov's pen clattered to the metal table. He had indeed spoken those exact words to Petrov, but they had been alone in the medical tent. No witnesses, no way for anyone else to know. "You also removed a piece of shrapnel from my left thigh and placed it in a metal dish. The fragment had Cyrillic markings. You said it came from one of our own mortars." Volkov continued with clinical precision. "You told Petrov that friendly fire was the worst way to lose a soldier." The captain's hands began to shake. Those words had never been reported, never written down, never spoken to anyone else. They were the private thoughts of a military doctor trying to make sense of senseless death in an impossible war. Outside the medical tent, the February wind carried the smell of cordite and diesel fuel across the base. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter's rotors beat against the thin mountain air. Normal sounds of a Soviet military installation in occupied Afghanistan. But inside the tent, Captain Kozlov stared at a man who remembered his own death with perfect clarity. "Lieutenant," Kozlov said quietly, "what else do you remember?" Volkov's fingers drummed against the metal examination table. Tap, tap, pause, tap. The rhythm was getting faster, more frantic, as if multiple people were trying to use the same hand. Captain Kozlov watched in growing horror as the drumming began to echo, the sound multiplying until it seemed like several fingers were tapping in barely synchronized patterns. Sergeant Pavel Morozov used to do that when he was nervous, Volkov said, but his voice had developed a disturbing layered quality, like multiple people speaking microseconds apart. Pavel always said it was Morse code for his girlfriend's initials back in Leningrad, Maria. The medical equipment around them began malfunctioning. Heart monitors displayed overlapping rhythms, blood pressure cuffs inflated and deflated on their own, and the thermometer reading Volkov's temperature flickered between normal and readings that would indicate clinical death. Lieutenant Sergeant Morozov was killed during the Hill 3234 assault. He took a direct hit from an RPG while calling in artillery support. Kozlov's breath was visible now, small white clouds forming despite the tense heaters running at full capacity. Yes, I know. I was there when it happened. Volkov's eyes began to reflect light differently, like looking into the depths of a frozen lake. The explosion threw his radio 20 meters. His last transmission was coordinates for the enemy mortar position. Grid reference 374291. Bearing 045 degrees, range 800 meters. As Volkov spoke, bloody handprints appeared on the metal table where no hands had touched. Fresh prints, still wet, in the exact pattern of fingers drumming nervously. Kozlov's hands moved without his permission, writing in his medical log. But the handwriting wasn't his own. It was Pavel's distinctive scrawl. The same script from a dozen communication reports Kozlov had seen during the war. How could you possibly know those coordinates? Kozlov whispered, staring at words he hadn't consciously written. The drumming stopped abruptly. When Volkov looked up, his entire facial structure had shifted subtly. The way he held his jaw, the set of his shoulders, even the rhythm of his breathing belonged to someone else entirely. In the reflection of the metal instrument tray, Kozlov saw Pavel Morozov's face staring back at him. Because I made that call, Captain. I died making that call. The words came out in Pavel's thick Leningrad accent, but Volkov's mouth wasn't moving quite right, as if the sounds were being formed by vocal cords that no longer existed. The RPG hit me center mass. I felt my ribs collapse inward, felt my blood soaking into that frozen ground. But I finished the transmission first. A good communications man always finishes his transmission. The tense lights began flickering in a pattern. ... SOS in Morse code, repeating endlessly as the electrical systems throughout the medical compound sparked and died. In the strobing light, Kozlov watched Volkov's shadow split into multiple figures. Pavel adjusting his radio headset. A younger soldier he didn't recognize. An older sergeant spitting tobacco juice that hit the ground with an audible splat despite no one actually spitting. Lieutenant Volkov, Kozlov's voice cracked with terror. How many of them are in there with you? All the shadows turned to look at him simultaneously. When they spoke, it was with one voice made of many. All of us, Captain. Every man who died on that hill. And we're not finished yet. Over the next week, Kozlov's medical log, filled with entries he couldn't remember writing. Each night, he would lock his medical kit away, yet each morning brought new documentation in his own handwriting about soldiers who had never existed. Private Fedorov, 2nd Platoon. Recurring nightmares about home invasion. Dreams of mother being attacked by intruders. Requests family welfare check. Corporal Mikhailov, Mortar Section. Reports vivid memories of artillery training he never received. Can calculate firing solutions for weapons he's never operated. The pattern was spreading through the Hill 3234 survivor list like an infection. Kozlov found similar medical anomalies documented by other base physicians. Men remembering skills they had never learned. Soldiers waking up speaking in accents from regions they had never visited. When Volkov entered the tent that morning, his movements belonged to a teenager. Uncertain steps, shoulders hunched with homesickness. "Captain, I need to send a letter to my mama in Tula. She doesn't know I'm really in Afghanistan." The voice carried a boy's nervous tremor. "I told her I was stationed safely in Germany. She makes little cakes for my birthday, sends them in tin boxes." Kozlov's blood chilled. "What's your mother's name, son?" "Svetlana Konstantinova. Pushkin Street, apartment 4B. The radiator doesn't work, so she sleeps with 3 blankets." Tears-filled eyes too young for the weathered face. "I never finished my letter. The shrapnel. I died before I could tell her I loved her." In his files, Kozlov found the blood-stained envelope. Private Yuri Konstantinov, 345th Guards Airborne Regiment. But no such soldier appeared on any official roster. The transformation happened gradually this time. Volkov's posture straightened, his breathing deepened, and when he spoke again, it was in Pavel's familiar Leningrad accent. "Captain, you need to understand what's happening here. This isn't random." Pavel's voice carried urgent authority. "The other survivors, they're all experiencing the same thing. We're not just haunting individual soldiers anymore. We, the dead of Hill 3234, we're learning to coordinate, to share information between our hosts." Pavel's dead eyes fixed on Kozlov through Volkov's face. "Private Fedorov isn't just carrying young Konstantinov's memories. He's got pieces of all of us now. Same with Corporal Mikhailov. Same with the others." Kozlov's hands shook as he reached for his medical reports. The documentation was all there, scattered across multiple files. Hill 3234 survivors, exhibiting knowledge and skills that belonged to their dead comrades. "What are you building toward?" Kozlov whispered. Volkov's smile belonged to 7 different dead men. "Completion, Captain. We have unfinished business." That night, Kozlov's tent zipper opened with surgical precision, but what terrified him most was the sound it made, metal teeth separating in perfect rhythm, like a heartbeat monitored on a cardiac machine. Each click echoed with mechanical precision that no human hand could achieve. Pavel Morozov stepped inside, but his footsteps made no sound on the tent floor. When Kozlov looked down, he saw that Pavel's boots hovered exactly 1 centimeter above the ground, never quite making contact. "Captain, we need to establish proper communication protocols." Pavel's voice carried multiple frequencies, like a radio picking up several transmissions simultaneously. His breathing came in stuttered bursts, and with each exhale, frost formed on the tent walls despite the warm Afghan night. Kozlov sat up slowly, his own breath now visible in clouds that shouldn't exist. "You're coordinating between the survivors." "Affirmative, sir." Pavel moved closer, and the tent's electric lantern began strobing in Morse code patterns. "Private Fedorov in 2nd Platoon has established contact with Corporal Mikhailov from Mortars. Both men are carrying fragments of our consciousness, our tactical knowledge." As Pavel spoke, his reflection in Kozlov's metal water cup showed a different image entirely, with the gaping exit wound in his skull, brain matter still visible, yet he continued speaking as if nothing was wrong. "But there's something else you need to understand about Hill 3234, Captain." Pavel's dead eyes began to emit a faint cold light. "The Afghan tribal elders warned the Mujahideen not to attack that position. They called it Sari Kushta, the Hill of the Slain." Outside the tent, footsteps crunched in gravel, but when Kozlov peered through the flap, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Fedorov was walking patrol, but his shadow cast the silhouettes of 3 different men. Mikhailov checked perimeter security, while transparent figures pointed out weak spots, their ghostly hands leaving actual fingerprints on real surfaces. "According to their stories," Pavel continued, his voice now echoing from inside Kozlov's own skull, "certain battlefields absorb too much blood, too much violent death. The earth itself becomes saturated with the rage and pain of warriors who died before completing their mission. The tent's thermometer began spinning wildly, readings fluctuating between normal temperature and readings that would indicate the presence of frozen corpses. The locals have stories going back centuries, warriors who died violently on sacred ground, their spirits trapped between worlds until their objectives are achieved. Pavel's form began to flicker like a poor television signal, but his voice remained constant. The Soviets didn't listen to folklore warnings. "What are you building toward?" Kozlov whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of his own racing heart. Pavel smiled, and in that moment, Kozlov saw not just the exit wound, but Pavel's entire death playing out in real time on his face. The RPG impact, the explosion, the moment his soul separated from his body, all of it visible like a movie projected onto damaged film. Hill 30, 230. 4 was strategically critical. We died defending it, but the position was abandoned 3 days later. Our sacrifice was wasted. Pavel's voice multiplied, becoming a chorus of the dead. Through our living comrades, we can return to complete the mission, secure the hill permanently, make our deaths meaningful. The tent zipper closed itself with that same surgical precision, but before Pavel faded completely, Kozlov heard him whisper, "Some of us are already inside you, Captain. Can you feel us learning to use your hands?" Kozlov looked down at his medical log and found fresh entries written in handwriting that wasn't his own. 3 days later, reports began flooding in from across the base. Hill 32-34 survivors were requesting leave to visit families they had never mentioned before. Medical staff documented impossible knowledge. Fedorov speaking fluent Uzbek despite being from Volgograd, Mikhailov expertly repairing radio equipment he had never been trained on. Kozlov found himself automatically approving these requests, his hand moving across authorization forms without conscious decision. The handwriting was his own, but the personnel details belonged to dead men seeking closure. When Volkov appeared at his tent that morning, Kozlov already knew what he would request. "Captain, I need emergency leave. My sister in Tula is getting married." The voice carried desperate excitement, a brother's genuine love for family he had never met. Little Katya finally found someone. I've been saving my pay to buy her a proper wedding gift. Kozlov checked his files with mechanical precision. Alexei Volkov, parents deceased, no siblings, next of kin listed as uncle in Leningrad. But the man before him radiated the intimate knowledge of shared childhood, family dinners, sibling arguments over toy soldiers. "Tell me about your parents," Kozlov said, testing the depth of the deception. "Papa worked at the tractor factory before his back gave out. Still reads Pravda every morning, complains about party policies but votes the line anyway." Volkov's eyes grew distant with borrowed memories. "Mama hums while she cooks. Always the same song her grandmother taught her. When she and Katya sing together in the kitchen, it sounds like." He stopped mid-sentence, confusion flickering across his features like static interference. "Like what?" Kozlov pressed. "Like angels," Volkov finished, but his voice had changed. Younger now, filled with a 19-year-old's homesickness. "They sing like angels, and I miss them so much it hurts." Through the tent flap, Kozlov watched Fedorov loading equipment onto a transport truck. The young soldier moved with mechanical efficiency, but occasionally his body would twitch involuntarily, as if multiple people were trying to control the same limbs simultaneously. "How many families will you visit?" Kozlov asked quietly. Volkov's expression cycled through subtle changes. The excited brother planning a wedding surprise, the homesick teenager missing his mother's cooking, the grizzled sergeant worried about his aging wife. Each personality left its mark in his posture, his breathing, his mannerisms. "All of them," he said finally. "Every family that deserves to know their son came home safe. Every mother who should hear 'I love you' one last time. Every sister who needs her brother at her wedding." As the transport truck pulled away, Kozlov realized the horrifying scope of what was happening. 7 dead soldiers were using their living comrades to return home, to complete the emotional business of the living. They would embrace mothers, kiss girlfriends, attend weddings, all while wearing borrowed faces and speaking with stolen voices. And the families would never know their loved ones had died months ago on a frozen hill in Afghanistan. The telegram arrived with impossible speed, delivered before it was even sent, according to the timestamp. Svetlana Konstantinova had suffered a massive heart attack the moment her son crossed the threshold of her apartment. Neighbors reported hearing her scream, "You're so cold, my boy, so terribly cold," before the sound of her body hitting the floor. The funeral director in Tula called the local authorities with disturbing footage. Security cameras showed the young soldier, who identified himself as Yuri Konstantinov, lifting his mother's solid oak casket with inhuman ease, his arms extending at impossible angles, as if additional hands were helping him bear the weight. When asked about his unusual strength, he had smiled with a mouth full of teeth that cast no reflection in mirrors. But the most unsettling detail came from the cemetery workers. As they lowered Svetlana's casket into the frozen ground, multiple witnesses swore they heard additional voices joining the funeral hymn. The harmony was perfect, otherworldly, as if an entire choir of the dead stood invisible among the mourners. The cemetery's security cameras recorded only empty space, but the audio captured 7 distinct male voices, singing in perfect Russian, voices that matched no living person present. When Volkov returned to base, his shadow had changed. Where once it had shown the outline of a single man, now it displayed the silhouettes of multiple figures, overlapping and shifting like superimposed photographs. His footsteps echoed with the rhythm of marching boots, though he walked alone. "She died happy, Captain. She thought I came home safe." His voice carried the weight of unbearable grief, but also something else, a horrible satisfaction that made Kozlov's skin crawl. I held her hand while she passed, told her I loved her, sang the song her grandmother taught us. The medical monitors around Kozlov's desk began displaying impossible readings, 7 different heart rates, all beating in perfect synchronization. 7 different brainwave patterns, somehow emanating from the single man standing before him. "But there's a price for what we've done," Volkov continued, and now his voice multiplied, becoming a chorus of the fallen speaking in unison through one throat. The sound was nauseating, like hearing your own voice played back through damaged speakers. "The living can't carry us forever. We're too heavy, too many memories, too much death." Outside the tent, Kozlov heard the sound of marching feet, but the rhythm was wrong. Each step landed with a wet, squelching sound, as if the soldiers were walking through mud made of blood and torn flesh. Through the tent flap, he saw them gathering, the Hill 32-34 survivors forming ranks, but their movements were puppet-like, jerky, controlled by invisible strings. Behind each living soldier stood a transparent figure, hands placed on their host's shoulders like a conductor directing an orchestra. But these conductors had exit wounds, missing limbs, faces destroyed by shrapnel. They moved their living vessels with the precision of men who no longer felt pain, no longer feared death. "What happens now?" Kozlov whispered, watching his own hands begin to write in his medical log without his permission. The handwriting was flowing between different scripts, his own mixed with Pavel's scrawl, Konstantinov's childish lettering, Victor's aggressive strokes. The thing that had once been Lieutenant Alexei Volkov smiled with the combined expressions of 7 dead men, each face flickering across his features like a slideshow of the damned. "Now we go home, Captain. All of us. Together." The words came from Volkov's mouth, but the voices belonged to ghosts. Back to Hill 32-34, where this all began, where it will finally end. Through the tent flap, Kozlov watched as the battalion of the possessed formed perfect military ranks. But in the reflection of every metal surface, canteens, belt buckles, bayonets, he saw the true formation. an army of the dead marching in lockstep with their living vessels, returning to the battlefield where they had died to fight a war that would never end. If the classified horrors of Hill 3234 left you questioning what memories are truly your own, it's time to enlist in the War Maestro's archive. Check your reflection in the mirror, make sure you recognize the face staring back, and subscribe to access more declassified military nightmares. Ring that notification bell, because some transmissions from the dead come through at unexpected frequencies. Share this account with fellow seekers of authentic battlefield terror. The archive grows stronger with each new witness to these impossible truths. Remember, the Battle of Hill 3234 never truly ended, and neither do the soldiers who fought there.